Hey, we're in Boulder, Colorado, and I'm with Morgan Lommele. She works with People for Bikes, which is a really interesting organization. Can you tell me more about what you do?
Sure. Well, here at People for Bikes, we're about 1.3 million members strong, and our goal is to get more people riding bikes more often. So electric bikes are kind of a natural progression of that, and for almost 4 years, I've been working on electric bike policy in the United States. So working to streamline all the definitions of e-bikes so that e-bike laws are the same from state to state.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about those laws and policies. I'm wondering, so how does it work if you have an e-bike but it has a motor? So are there different places that you can ride it and other places you can't ride it? That's the sort of thing you're working on.
Yeah, exactly. So about 3, 4, 5 years ago, the e-bike, or the bike industry rather, realized that e-bike laws were different in every single state. Every state has its own vehicle code. Every state has its own laws for what you can ride, where you can ride it, and e-bikes were generally categorized as either a bicycle or motorized bicycle or moped, and it was pretty confusing for consumers and retailers. So that's how this whole program started, is to make sure that the e-bike laws are the same from state to state. So if someone rides from California across the country, they don't have to worry about what the laws are.
Okay, well great. Well, let's learn a little bit more about that. You have some slides and stuff to show us.
I do. So this is a presentation that we do a lot. We're really trying to spread the word and write information about e-bikes. And so typically people have a lot of questions about who rides e-bikes, what does the market look like? So I like to kind of set the stage about that. You know, a few years ago I would have definitely said that the majority of e-bike riders are 40 to 70 years old, but that's really broadening. There's no generalization for who rides e-bikes and why anymore.
It's becoming really popular among younger people.
That's noticed. It really has been, and it's fascinating to watch. A lot of people who choose not to purchase a car are looking to get around on e-bike or bike, but definitely on e-bikes too. So that 25 to 40-year-old segment is growing. You know, moms, dads wanting to carry their kids around town are growing, and then obviously you have people moving into their older age who just simply want to keep on riding a bike.
Yeah, for sure. Or even environmentally conscious commuters, really. That's what comes to mind. Yeah, and of course hauling around toddlers, that can be a real challenge on a normal bike.
So lots of different reasons to ride an e-bike.
Cool.
Yeah. E-bike market. So, you know, the bike market, some categories are kind of suffering, others are doing really well, and e-bikes are doing really well too. So as you can see here, 1% of all bikes sold in 2016 were e-bikes, and that's 7% in 2017.
Wow, of all bikes. That's a huge jump in 1 year.
Yep. So
that's amazing.
Gosh, yeah, the market's almost doubling year to year, so pretty significant growth.
So some laws and policies are really needed at this point.
Yeah, and that'll make it easier for people to walk into a bike shop and say, where can I ride this thing, and for the answer to be pretty consistent.
Cool.
Yeah. So then I get the question, you know, where can I ride this thing? And, you know, people say, well, the federal government defines e-bikes as bikes, therefore you can ride them everywhere. And that is incorrect. The federal government says what you can sell legally. So, and the states tell you what you can ride. So you can walk into a bike shop anywhere, legally buy an e-bike, but in a lot of states you can't legally ride it out of the shop. So that's really our work there, is cleaning that up. So, you know, the federal government, for the purpose of manufacturing and for sale, they do define an e-bike as a bicycle, generally consistent with how they're defined at the state level as well. So obviously states regulate what you can ride and where, and in 2015 California was the first state to define 3 classes of e-bikes as a bicycle. So class 1 is a pedal assist only. You have to be pedaling to engage the motor, and that motor will cut off at about 20 miles an hour. Class 2 is a throttle actuated e-bike, and the motor will cut off at 20 miles an hour. And Class 3 is pedal assist, motor will cut off at 28 miles an hour. So you can have slightly higher motor assisted speeds on a Class 3 bike.
Did you say 28 miles an hour?
28.
Okay, so Class 1 and 2 it stops at 20, and then Class 3 would be 28.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yep.
That doesn't seem like a huge difference to me.
No, it's not, and people always ask, how did you come to that? It's not a perfect system, it's the best we've found, and it's pretty consistent with what was sold in Europe at the time when we were doing this. And if you remember that federal definition, that maxes out at 20 miles an hour. So there is a gray area. How does a class 3 e-bike fall within that federal definition? But we looked at what the federal government defined, what was sold in Europe, and what was anticipated to be sold a lot more in the US.
Okay, cool.
So yeah, basically we're going state by state in every state legislature trying to clean up the definition of an e-bike, either from very random and weird definitions of motorcycles to bicycles, but really trying to define 3 classes in every single state. So 2015, California was the first state. 2016, Colorado.
Nice.
Yes.
We're in Colorado right now.
Actually, Colorado was 2017, I believe, but we have about 10 states now that all have the same definition, pretty much the same definition of an e-bike, and hopefully in a few years we'll get to all 50.
Do you have any idea how long that might take, or is it hard to know just because of government?
I wonder if we've knocked off all the easy ones from our list and now it gets harder, or, we have knocked off some hard ones and we're building momentum where this national standard is established and states are following suit.
We heard that recently New York City, they allows class 1 e-bikes now.
Yeah,
So
well,
that
New
was a
York
big
City
deal.
really always allowed class 1 e-bikes. They wouldn't admit it, but our interpretation of their municipal code was that they did. But the good news is they did formalize it in their rulemaking.
Awesome. Thank you, New York.
Yeah, thank you. Well, New York City, and then New York State still technically doesn't even allow e-bikes to be ridden on the street. So
Oh, no.
you can on the city, not on the street.
Oh, okay.
Wow.
Which is a complicated.
Not even the side of the road?
No, because this is the crux of the issue. New York State defines an e-bike as a motorized vehicle, and you would need to register your motorized vehicle at the DMV. There's no VIN on an e-bike, so you roll it up, they can't give you any kind of license or paperwork you need for a vehicle without a VIN. So technically, you're illegally riding your e-bike.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Room for improvement.
Yeah, for
Yep.
sure.
And one thing that's super important to remember is this only deals with e-bike use on the pathways, in your cities, and on the street. It has nothing to do with electric mountain bike access, and we'll get into that in a few minutes.
Yeah. There's we saw this deck when we were up in Mammoth, and I've met you before, maybe at Interbike or some other stuff. You're pretty active in this, and there's a lot here. So yeah, we can keep going.
Yeah, a ton of information. So this is obviously a visual representation of what we're talking about here. Next thing I get asked a lot is, well, how fast do e-bike riders go, and is it unsafe? Are they motorcycles, etc.? I'm sure we've all dealt with a lot of these questions. There are some studies out there that show that e-bike riders travel a couple miles an hour faster than traditional bikes. But really it depends on who's riding, what kind of bike they have, what class of e-bike they have, whether they're carrying cargo or kids. So, obviously a bike with a small motor will help you go faster on the uphills and on the flats. But if you ride one, you really realize that they're pretty similar to a bike, and you can't get going that much faster.
Yeah, I don't feel like I'm on any sort of truly motorized vehicle at all when I ride an e-bike. Just feel like, somebody's just giving me a boost, really.
We did that riding off-road in the mountains the other day, and I think our average speed was 10 or 11 miles per hour.
Yeah, it wasn't anything huge. I didn't feel like I was riding a dirt bike down the road or
Exactly,
anything like that.
Yeah.
And for the class, especially when we talk about trail access for electric mountain bikes, it's really only class 1 e-bikes, and you have to be pedaling to engage the motor. So it's
that's
nothing
true.
like a motorcycle.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
I always want to let people know that some municipalities have done significant research on what happens when you add e-bikes to the mix of trail users on bike paths and on the road. So Boulder County, Colorado, and Jefferson County, Colorado have done similar research, and the outcome generally is that adding an e-bike to the mix of trail users, hikers, bikers, dog walkers, doesn't really impact anyone's overall experience. And if you were to ask people after the fact if they knew they were sharing the trail or bike path with an e-bike, most of them would say no. So, if you were to ask someone, what do you think of e-bikes? A lot of people will say, well, we don't like them. I don't want to share a trail with a motorcycle. Then you get that person on an e-bike, and they're much more kind of open to the idea.
Yeah, because then they have a different framework of what it actually is.
Yeah, they've ridden one. They know that it's kind of like a bike. You have to be pedaling generally. Yeah.
That's cool.
So, yeah, these are great studies to reference. They're all on our website, peopleforbikes.org/e-bikes. And, there is a lot more research coming out, but these are good tools to have in your toolbox. So obviously then we kind of get into electric mountain bikes, and you know, I worked at the International Mountain Bicycling Association for 5 years.
IMBA.
Yeah. And also just am a policy analyst, so I kind of get a kick out of electric mountain bike issues. It's an interesting puzzle. So as I mentioned, when we talk about electric mountain bike access, it's class 1 e-bikes only, and those are the pedal assist only e-bikes where the motor cuts off at about 20 miles an hour. So
Okay, so you're saying at this point, all electric mountain bikes are class 1, and that's all that's allowed legally, or?
well, that's kind of where we've drawn the line. People are much more sensitive about trail access.
Yes.
And we, as an industry and as an advocacy group, have just figured that if we're going to advocate for class 1 electric mountain bike, or just electric mountain bike access, we probably should limit it to class 1. The optics of a throttle actuated e-bike or a higher assisted speed e-bike just don't really fly with a lot of lane managers and other advocates.
So maybe to your point, Brandy, they do exist. Like I've reviewed electric bikes that they're more powerful, they've got a throttle, and it looks like a mountain bike because it has knobby tires and stuff.
Yeah.
But that means it's, you know, class 2 if it has that throttle, or class 3, or even, what's it called? Like if you are over 28 miles per hour. I mean,
not an e-bike, yeah.
Yeah. Is there like a term?
It really depends. Yeah.
I was talking to Larry Peasy, who is he connected to People for Bikes somehow?
Well, he runs the BPSA e-bike committee, and the BPSA is the Bicycle Product Suppliers Association, and they're the industry trade group advocating for kind of bicycle industry policies.
He called it something like out of bounds or something.
Like an out-of-class device, really.
Yeah.
So we just really try to distinguish class 1, 2, and 3 e-bikes from anything else.
And we do tag that. On the website, I call them just class 4 because I didn't know what else to label them as. And we might update that in the future and to get the naming right. But the idea was, if you have private property or something, like, sure, you can go drive your four-wheeler, you can get a whatever you want, put a chainsaw on the back of your bike and let it rip. But that's not necessarily allowed on these classes. And we don't want to give e-bikes a bad name if people are out there, like you said, kind of ripping up the trail or something.
So the benefit of the class system is that it just defines what an e-bike is and is not. Class 4, whatever you want to call it, is just kind of a motorcycle at that point, the higher engine. Yeah.
Electric motorcycle.
So what you're advocating for is, okay, we're going to put electric mountain bikes into class 1, and that's what we're going to be going for policy-wise, and that's sort of where we've landed, like with Mammoth and the resorts that open up to that it's a class 1 deal. Yeah.
And the reality is, riding an electric mountain bike is much more than just your speed. You know, there's a technical component, trail features, rocks, descents, lots of different things that make it harder, just aside from having to pedal uphill. So even if you're pedaling an electric mountain bike uphill on a class 3 e-bike, you're probably still limited to 10, 15 miles an hour.
That is totally the case. I mean, so I've done this. There are places where it's just like, whatever, this is an off-highway vehicle trail, and it's like I don't end up going much faster.
You're still pretty limited by just the terrain.
Yeah, the terrain. Yeah. So that's, I don't know, that's cool. That kind of keeps the door open maybe a little bit for future. So when we think about electric mountain bike policy, we think about what happens on the federal level, state level, and local level. So federal level is the Park Service, Forest Service, the Bureau of Land Management. They're generally the 3 biggest agencies that manage recreation at the federal level, and they consider e-bikes to be motor vehicles. So what that means is you can ride your e-bike, regardless of the class, anywhere you can ride a motorcycle on motorized trails. We're trying to work with agencies so that they take e-bikes out of the categorization of motor vehicles. Maybe not a bike, but definitely not a motorcycle. That's on the horizon. That's good. And you can imagine like a real motorcycle, like loud, heavy, definitely faster than 10 miles per hour up or downhill if they want to.
Yeah.
And if you're on a bicycle, essentially, with like a little 250 watt motor, that's almost seems unsafe. Like there's a big difference between those two.
And it's not a new rule by any means. It's just an outdated kind of like lumping e-bikes and electric vehicles into motorcycles.
That's part of your work here.
Right, you have a job of untangling it all.
It's good job security.
Yeah.
At the state level, so every state has its own state park agency, and we know of probably a dozen different state parks across the country that allow class 1 electric mountain bikes wherever you can ride a bicycle. And then local level is even more variable. So every city, every county has its own agency, and they all have their own rules about e-bikes.
Okay.
That's pretty complicated. It's a little
It
involved.
is, yeah. We've tried to clarify it just to the extent we can. Our website does have a handout on every state, so it'll tell you what the laws are
Oh,
for each
that's
state.
nice.
Yeah.
We always
Sounds
encourage you to
very
go, if you're really curious or uncertain, to give the agency a phone call or something. But,
Is there any way people can help? Like.
yeah, so great question. We put together what we call our eMTB Playbook. So we can't be everywhere all the time, and it's just a quick, easy to read, very functional handout on how you can help locally if you want to improve access for electric mountain bikes in your area. So kind of step-by-step process, and then some talking points.
Okay.
So.
Cool.
Nice.
So for those of you who are policy wonks out there looking for the exact CFR for where e-bikes are defined as motorcycle, here those codes are.
So BLM, NPS, and USFS, these are the 3 different federal agencies that tend to be the ones that need to change policy, or you're trying to help them change policy.
These are generally the biggest landholders when it comes to recreation. I mean, you have recreation on reclamation property, Army Corps, Fish and Wildlife, but most major mountain bike destinations are on these 3 different
Right.
agencies.
So
Okay.
depending on where you are, you should probably know what agency you're dealing with as far as laws, and maybe go to your site and figure a little bit of that out if you want to know the rules. Yeah.
Exactly. And and on the East Coast, there are a lot more state and local lands, not as many federal lands. So,
Okay.
my first step is always kind of take a map out and figure out where you like to ride and try to narrow it down from there.
Cool.
I mentioned some states that do allow electric mountain bikes on trails where trails where bicycles are allowed. So generally single track trails. This is really us calling, emailing, asking for them to interpret their policies so that we can tell consumers where to ride.
Yeah. Has that been relatively easy to try to find someone who will listen and be able to update that stuff for you?
In some states, yeah. For example, in Colorado State Park said, we haven't had any issues with electric mountain bikes on trails so far, so we are going to allow them wherever you can ride a bike. And I think there are about 52 state parks or 42 in Colorado.
There's a lot here.
That's awesome.
And other state parks, California state parks have said they're motorized vehicles and only allowed where you can ride a motorcycle. So it's not always hard to get a hold of someone, but it's hard to get a hold of someone who will say yes or no definitively. And generally they say no. But
Yeah.
because it's easier to, and it's an unknown. And
Right. Well,
They've
perhaps
had a lot-
that'll change as the
Exactly.
e-bike space keeps getting bigger and bigger.
That's true. It has been growing a lot, as
Yeah.
we saw.
Yeah, there's a lot of growth, and I think that a lot of agencies are under pressure to figure out and clarify what their policies are.
Cool.
Yeah, it makes it safer for everyone.
It really does. If you ban something, people are likely to thumb their noses at it, but if you give them kind of some leeway and some room to work with, they're more likely to follow the rules.
And get some tourism bucks.
Exactly. There are
Yeah,
lots of
true.
reasons. Locally, so again, every city, county has its own rules. Jefferson County, Colorado is probably the best example of an agency allowing electric mountain bikes on their trails. So just this year, they authorized a 1-year pilot project to allow Class 1 eMTBs anywhere a bike is allowed on their 250-ish miles of trail.
That's
So,
awesome. Wow.
Lots of wonderful trails to ride in the Front Range on Jeffco property.
Pilot project, question mark?
Yeah, it's called a pilot project. I think they're just not willing to commit to a long-term rule change.
Kind of wait and see what happens
Yeah.
with this.
Yeah, I
But
hope
they
it goes
did a lot
well.
of research around it and feel confident that it's the right decision.
Well, I
That's
think
great.
that's great. They're willing to step out and see if that's right or not, instead of
Yeah.
just saying no, even just yes without knowing
Yep.
the facts and the safety of it.
And they knew people were riding trails too. So.
No,
Yeah.
that's true. If people are doing it
Yeah.
anyways, then.
Oh, that's true.
So.
Interesting.
Santa Clara County Parks, for those of you in the Bay Area, they also have allowed Class 1 electric mountain bikes. Most anywhere you can ride an e-bike. I always tell people to go and actually read the policy if you're interested in riding there. Generally, otherwise, e-bikes are considered motorized.
Okay.
So this kind of gets into the weeds here, but travel management planning is one way for advocates to allow electric mountain bikes in non-motorized areas. And every 4, 5, 6 years, Forest Service units will reevaluate all their motorized trail system. And that's an opportunity to re-establish where an e-bike is allowed or not. in the San Juan National Forest. If you're interested, look that up. They have allowed Class 1 eMTBs on 13 miles of their trail on a non-motorized trail.
Wow, that's cool.
Yeah, so technically the trail becomes motorized, but it's restricted to electric mountain bikes and bikes.
And Class 1 only?
Yes, the Purgatory, which is on the San Juan, it's just Class 1.
Okay, cool.
Nice.
Then we're seeing a lot of ski areas open up their ski areas to Class 1 eMTB. So Mammoth Mountain is probably the biggest one. That's about 80 miles of trail.
That just happened. What was that, like in June 2018?
Yeah, May 2018, yep.
June, yeah.
Purgatory, Colorado was in 2017. And then we're just seeing more and more allow Class 1 eMTBs within their boundaries. So Angel Fire, North Star, Steamboat. So again, if you're interested in riding here, just kind of double check what the rules are or send us a note directly and we'll help you figure that out. But point is, there's momentum behind allowing electric mountain bikes where it fits. You know, as an organization, People for Bikes advocates for a local land manager really to figure that out on their own, but with the resources that we provide.
Yeah.
So I have a question about the consequences. So if someone's just like, whatever, I'm just going to ride my trail, and maybe it's not allowed, I mean, you get a $50 ticket. Is there an issue with, like, if you crash into something, now you're liable for riding an unlicensed vehicle, or like what happens for those people?
Gosh, it really depends on where you're riding illegally. I'm sure different ordinances. You know, I've heard some land managers kind of lending a blind eye to e-bike riders on their trails.
Yeah.
But you know, in some instances, I'm sure you're subject to a fine or confiscation or
Oh man,
who knows? Yeah.
Some of these bikes are pretty expensive too.
Yeah,
So that'd be a bummer.
Yeah.
So I don't really recommend riding on trails you're not allowed to ride on.
Sure.
Yeah, bad things could happen, I guess. I hope not, but.
Yeah. Thanks.
So, yeah, I mentioned we do try to give land managers all the resources they need to figure out what an e-bike is, kind of management tools, where they're allowed, where they're not allowed, and give them some peer-to-peer case studies. We have a lot of resources for people who want to ride an electric mountain bike to find a good place to ride too. So I'll run through some of those really quickly, but I would encourage everyone to go to peopleforbikes.org/e-bikes, and this is all on there as well.
Cool.
So we have an eMTB map. I'll show you a screenshot right here, and we're really trying to build it out, but it's about 45,000 miles of trails that we know are open to Class 1 or just electric mountain bikes.
Yay.
Yeah.
Not always
Like a
kind of
lot.
your beautiful single track. You know, it's important to think about broadening our definition of what a great electric mountain bike ride is, but these are all great places to go find a ride.
That was nice.
Yeah. If anyone has a favorite ride that's not on there, we encourage you to send it in too.
Where would they do? Is that just at the website, or is
Yep.
there a specific contact or something?
So go to peopleforbikes.org/eMTB, and it's just a really simple crowdsourcing form, and we make sure it's legal. It's all.
That's right. You guys double check it. So these
Yeah.
are all like verified
Yeah.
rides. That's
And
awesome.
There have been a couple instances of rides that we verified that turned out to not be open to electric mountain bikes, and people have kindly told us, and sometimes not so kindly, but we take it off too. We try to make it a good legal resource.
What is People for Bikes exactly? Like, who funds it, or what? Are you a think tank, or what's?
Well, we're a nonprofit advocacy organization, a 501c3, and we're also 501c6, which means we're politically active.
Interesting.
So, half of our funding comes from the bike industry, just supporting the cause of better biking, and the other half comes from individual donors, foundations.
Right. I think I've put a couple bucks your way in the
Good,
past.
thank you. We encourage everyone to contribute. Yeah, we rely on our members. So.
Awesome.
Great. So the next thing we have, we call them eMTB Adventures, and these are all just one-page maps on finding a great ride in all these areas. So kind of destination-worthy, 20, 30, 40 miles of trail. We suggest a route. We give you parking and directions.
Oh,
So
fun.
yeah, check those out.
Awesome.
Try to
Yeah,
do
good
a coast-
vacation.
Yeah, vacation rides. Trail etiquette guidelines to give people a little bit more information about how to ride respectfully on trails, and this is great for retailers too.
Yeah, that's a good resource.
And not just for electric bikes, but like the
Exactly.
yield thing. Like,
Yeah.
hikers yield the horses, and bikers yield the hikers.
Never
and stuff.
assume
Yeah.
that people know that, so we just
True.
try to put out the right information. You know, we still don't know who rides an electric mountain bike has been riding a mountain bike their whole life and has switched over, or
Yeah.
who's new to the sport completely because of the small motor. So just try to put out some guidelines for sharing the trail for everyone.
Okay.
Get a lot
There
of
it
questions.
is.
Yeah, some
There's the
signs. These are just some examples of signs that people could use to either mark trails open to e-bikes or not.
That's what we saw at Mammoth.
Yeah,
right?
these
Is that
two
what
are
it
from
is?
Mammoth. These are older, just more generic signs. But just putting out some resources there. We have something called our eMTB handbook, and this is about a 50-page guide that we published in 2017 for land managers, but also advocates and trail builders trying to understand how to manage electric mountain bikes on trails.
Yeah.
So it's kind of describes the desired experiences of electric mountain bike riders, who rides them, any kind of physical impacts that might occur on the trail because of an electric mountain bike, that kind of heavier bike.
We talked about that, and it sounded like they were pretty limited. You had a couple case studies or something?
Yeah, I mean, what we know from a few small studies is that a Class 1 eMTB has similar impacts as a traditional mountain bike. And that definitely changes with a throttle-actuated Class 2 e-bike or Class 3 or even a motorcycle. But the physical impacts are pretty similar.
Mm-hmm.
That's great news.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, and that really leaves the question of social impacts. So what happens on a trail where you're mixing electric mountain bikes and traditional mountain bikes? Will people continue to ride there? Will they feel safe? A lot of different questions are still out there, and we really only can answer those by allowing Class 1 electric mountain bikes in some areas and seeing what happens.
It's like back to that trial use that we were talking about in
so that's why
Colorado.
Jeffco is such a great example.
On that note, I want to say any bike, if you're going down fast and you're braking, slamming on your brakes, that's hard on the trails, or if it's muddy, a lot of trails get shut down, so you don't want to create all those huge ruts and stuff. And then ideally, if we have more people riding bikes, whether they're electric or not, that could mean more trails, more dollars for that outdoor part, and then more people can just go enjoy the outdoors, right? Yeah.
I would love, more trails would solve a lot of our problems, So on the same token, I shared some studies we know from Boulder County and Jefferson County. We also did a study in Fruita, Colorado, which is on the western slope of Colorado, great mountain bike destination. And we partnered with the Bureau of Land Management on a quick study looking at some of the social impacts of electric mountain bikes. And the findings were similar to what we found in Colorado and Boulder County. So generally, if someone tries an e-bike, their perception is more favorable after they've tried it.
Yeah, I'm seeing a pattern with that.
Yeah.
People discovering what an e-bike actually is and realizing, oh, this isn't that much different than a normal bike.
Exactly. And one of the questions we asked was, if you're riding a traditional mountain bike and this trail allowed electric mountain bikes, would you still ride here? Mm-hmm. Most people said yes, they would, but most people wouldn't want to share the trail with an electric mountain bike. And some of the concerns they mentioned, you'll see here, overcrowding of trails. There might be user conflict. People just by riding a mountain bike access or mountain bike trail. With an electric mountain bike, they might jeopardize some of the access gains that we've seen over the last 30 years. So still a lot of concerns out there. It's not my decision, it's a land management decision, but we always just try to make sure that land managers know what an e-bike is and they kind of have the tools to allow them if they want to.
Yeah, that's great. Giving them tools and information and maybe even trying some stuff out and then making the decision that's right for that particular piece of land. I think that's great. It's a really great way to approach it.
On that point, you were saying over the last 30 years, where more and more trails that used to be hiking only have recently or relatively recently allowed any bikes. And now they're like, oh, we just got that. Now you want to do e-bikes. But again, that's Class 1. That seems to be a real sticking point here.
It is a sticking point, and it's not as no trail just gets closed overnight. A lot of trails took years to build and lots of support. So really what it is just making sure you have a good public process and preserving access. But I haven't seen no single mile of trail closed because of electric mountain bike access.
That's awesome. Let's keep it that way. And on that note, take years to build those trails. It might only take months if you use electric bikes because it's so much easier to haul the axes and the shovels and stuff.
We really encourage people that if you're an electric mountain bike rider and you're new to advocacy and mountain biking, just go out and participate in a trail day too and kind of join the community.
And help out, I have heard a lot of the trail builders do use electric bikes now, right? Has that been your experience, or have you?
That's probably one of the kind of highlights of a land manager. When you talk about electric mountain bikes, they can take an electric mountain bike out 4 or 5 miles in an hour, whereas it used to take them 2 or 3 hours to hike out to and do a lot more maintenance.
Wow, that's
Yeah,
awesome.
That's a great point.
So, this is kind of on the same token. One of our programs that I'm pretty happy about is our land manager program. So we partner with manufacturers and we'll send electric mountain bikes, for kind of like a 2 or 3 week trial period to land managers so that they simply can ride one and test them out and, use them for maintenance or for patrolling or visitor services.
Yeah.
And they obviously send them back when they're done, but it's helpful for them to understand what they're trying to manage.
Is this you catching the sweet air?
That is not me. That's our friend Jason. We did a photo shoot up in Portland. Yeah.
Nice.
But we reached about 20 lane managers last year, and it's just kind of on demand. If they need one, we'll try to match them up with one nearby.
Cool.
Another thing we're doing that I'm kind of excited about is our Where to Ride program. So maybe in 2016, we kind of looked at a map of where you could ride an electric mountain bike and realized that they're all outside of urban areas. And if you think about it, motorized access is generally further away from big cities because of noise and emissions and pollution. But an e-bike doesn't have any of those things. So if you restrict an e-bike to motorized trails, they really don't have anywhere to ride close to town.
That's the point we were talking about where you're like surrounded by motorcycles now, and that's maybe not even super safe.
Right. So we looked at San Francisco, LA, Denver, Seattle, Boston. We looked at DC a little bit, but we're trying to do, again, kind of a ride guide for cities and local areas. And this is just a heat map of Los Angeles, and trying to find like a 1 hour drive, I think, from a downtown point here, and trying to find places within that drive time
To ride.
To ride.
With my e-bike. That's great.
So we have guides available for San Francisco, LA, and Denver, and we're working. Boston will be out this month, and then Seattle's a little bit further down simply because there aren't a ton of places to ride close
So
to
those
Seattle.
guides, are they about electric mountain bikes only, or do you have things on normal e-bikes about those cities?
Well, the guide for this would be just kind of a one-pager on 3 great rides within an hour's drive of LA.
Oh, nice. Okay.
Yeah, same for San Francisco and Denver. And you asked me about this earlier, so here's just a quick picture of it. On our website, we do have that eMTB Playbook, and that's a step-by-step guide for being a local advocate for better access if that's what you want to do. So just
That's
tried
great.
to put that resource down on paper so people can use it in their hometown.
Yeah, nice.
And that is the end of our overview of all our resources and our policy work. That's my email address. We really try to be a resource for anyone, riders, land managers, industry, wanting more information. So I would encourage you to be in touch and check out our resources.
Nice. Thanks for talking with us today. I have
Yeah.
a question for you. Do
Yeah.
you ride an e-bike?
I have a 2-year-old and a 3-year-old, so I ride them around
Aw.
on my Yuba Spicy Curry. Yep.
Cool. The cargo bike, right?
Cargo bike, yep.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I think I saw a picture of you with them when we were up in
Oh,
there.
yeah,
It was
yeah.
so cute.
Yeah, so they love it.
Yeah.
It's nice. I live on a hill, and I obviously ride them around in a chariot on a traditional bike too, but it just helps use a bike every single day. So
Yeah, for sure.
That's fantastic.
Well, thanks again. It's been really lovely catching up with you and
Yeah.
learning more about e-bike policy. It's really important. Thanks for all the work that you do and
Yeah.
all the work that you're trying, all the untangling that you're trying to
Mhm,
do with
exactly.
e-bike policy.
and we should touch base in maybe a year, and hopefully we'll have a lot more states that
And
have turned
more green
green.
on that map,
Yeah,
right?
more green. Yeah.
Yeah.
How big is the team here, Morgan?
People for Bikes is about 25 people strong. We have about 20 people here in Boulder, and then a few people in DC working on our lobbying team, and lots of bloggers and writers and other partners around the country.
Sweet. Electric Bike Review is not associated with People for Bikes. We just thought this would be fun, and we got to hang out up at Mammoth, like Brandy was saying.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
thank you again. Thanks for the extra time today.
Yeah, happy trails.